Hi everyone, very good evening and welcome back to CrackGradeB. Sorry for the delay. So yes, we need to talk about rural banking and cooperative credit system in it. We have already discussed this when we were talking about the cooperatives setup, right? We have had an introduction for that. But in today's lecture, what we are going to do is we will be talking about what is the performance, right? What is the status of these cooperatives as of now, ठीक है, किस तरीके का क्या structure है, क्या functions हैं, as well as what are the growth indicators, how has been the performance and all of it. We are going to discuss it one by one. So let us start talking about it. See, first of all, I would like to introduce you with this particular chart that we have in hand. So this chart indicates that what is the current structure of cooperatives in India, right? How many cooperatives are that, and on that particular line we are going to be discussing this further, right? इसी line पे हम इसको आगे discuss करते जाएंगे. For example, all cooperatives, these are the number of cooperatives that we are having right now in India. This data, you can consider this as a latest data, right? Because the data has been taken from the 2022-2023 report of RBI. Okay, so that is why you can totally rely on this particular data. Then we have something called as urban cooperatives 1502 and rural cooperatives 1,05,268, right? So cooperatives are divided into two sections, urban as well as rural. What is there in urban? So in urban we have scheduled cooperatives and then non-scheduled cooperatives. There are two sections to it. When we talk about rural cooperatives, we have short-term cooperatives and long-term cooperatives. Long-term cooperatives, they are less in number, 617. This is the only number that we have, and in short-term cooperatives we have 1,04,651. Okay. Coming back to short-term cooperatives, what are the further, what you can say, classification of it? So we will see there is a state level cooperative, right? Then we have district level cooperatives as well as primary agriculture credit society. Then for the long term basis, we have the agriculture and rural development banks at the state level, and at primary level we have agriculture and rural development banks. So this is the structure of the cooperatives. Hi Vaishnavi. So if you have any question related to course thing, then I would suggest you to please call on the helpline number. They will be able to guide you better. है ना? You need to talk on that. Now this is the structure of cooperatives that we have seen in a bird view. Now we are going to see the status. ठीक है? Status क्या है right now cooperatives का? So let us start reading. See, structure of the cooperative banking sector. So credit cooperatives comprising urban cooperative banks as well as the rural cooperative credit institution, they had their history before independence, right? And after that they were formed to meet the development aspirations of the economy that we already know, right? Urban cooperatives, they are classified as scheduled or the non-scheduled one. On what basis? If they are included in the second schedule of RBI Act 1943. अगर RBI Act में included है, sorry 1934 it is, right? This is a mistake. Please ignore this. So yes, if the urban cooperative banks, they are included in the schedule 2 of RBI Act 1934, then they will be considered as scheduled urban cooperative banks, otherwise non-scheduled cooperative banks, right? The same thing which is applicable on to the commercial banks is applicable on the urban cooperatives as well. In पर भी same ही चीज applicable है. Rural credit cooperatives, they are classified into short term or long term institution basis of the finance that they are providing. ठीक है, जिस तरीके का finance provide करेंगे उसी type में इनको include किया जाएगा. As per the latest data available, there were 1502 urban cooperative banks and 1,05,268 rural cooperative banks. the more than 97% of rural cooperative banks, they are primary agriculture credit society. In the rural cooperatives, we have seen three levels, right? State level cooperatives, district level cooperatives, and then primary agriculture credit society, that is PACS. तो हमारे पास में तीन levels हैं. Out of that, 97% of the rural cooperatives, they are under the primary agriculture credit society. Now I will show you the numbers as well. Now here is a note for you. Just look at it. See, after the PMC bank crisis, it was decided that RBI should have more and more control over the cooperatives. ठीक है, ज़्यादा control होना चाहिए cooperatives के ऊपर में. But still, primary agriculture credit societies and the long-term rural credit cooperatives, they are outside the regulatory purview of RBI. ठीक है, जो हमारे लॉन्ग टर्म रूरल क्रेडिट कोऑपरेटिव्स हैं वो बाहर हैं. शॉर्ट टर्म में स्टेट as well as your district, they are under the RBI regulations, but primary agriculture credit society, that is PACS, which operates at ground level, ठीक है, जो कि ground level पे operate करती है, that is not something which is under the RBI control. ठीक है, ये RBI के control के अंदर नहीं है. Now moving ahead and looking at the structure again. So right now we saw that 97% रूरल जो आपका शॉर्ट टर्म कोऑपरेटिव्स है उसमें 97 जो है परसेंट जो है वो आपके PACS हैं. क्लियरली वी कैन सी out of 1,04,651 short term cooperatives, 1,04,266 are just PACS, primary agriculture credit society. That means these are the societies which operate at village level. So वो ही जो है यहाँ पे represented है. Once we have gotten this particular structure, now we are going to move forward and we'll be talking about one by one about these levels, right? Let us see this. See, the consolidated assets of cooperative banking sector at the end of March 2022, it was 21.6 lakh crores, around 10% of that of scheduled commercial bank. So why this particular data has been given? So that you can compare that what is the level of importance of scheduled commercial bank in India and what is the level of importance of cooperative banks in India. ठीक है, दोनों का एक side by side comparison is something that you have. So the asset size of scheduled cooperative banks, right? Sorry, the asset size of cooperative banks is just 10% of the asset side of scheduled commercial banks. So you can just gauge the, what you can say, broad asset size of scheduled commercial bank versus the cooperative banks. Rural cooperative, they comprise more than 2/3 of this particular sector. So this is what I am talking about. So this is distribution of credit cooperatives by the asset size. ठीक है, किसके पास कितनी asset है उस हिसाब से हम बात कर रहे हैं. Look at this particular diagram very carefully. This is going to give you an idea. So यहाँ पे देखो, look at this, the first level. Firstly, we divide any structure on the basis of rural and urban. So जब हमने rural और urban के basis पे divide किया, so 31% of the assets are there with urban cooperatives and 69% of the assets are with the rural cooperatives. In the rural cooperatives, if we are going to see short-term rural cooperatives, they represent 66%, right? And long-term represent 3%. ठीक है, so rural में भी if rural is 69%, out of that 66% are short-term cooperatives and 3% are long-term cooperatives. This what you can say, this division and this diagram is based on the asset size. ठीक है, asset size के ऊपर ये आपका diagram जो है वो depend करता है. Number one thing. Then even in short term, if we are going to see district level 30%. Now don't go on the number. When I said that PACS are 97%, that was on the basis of number. मैं यहाँ पे asset के basis पे बात कर रही हूँ. ज़्यादा asset किसके पास में है? District level cooperatives having 30%, state level cooperatives having 19%, and primary agriculture credit society having 17%. So this is how we have divided the rural cooperative structure. ठीक है, हमने इस तरीके से rural cooperative structure को divide किया है. If I talk about urban cooperative structure, see, scheduled banks, scheduled urban cooperative banks, they are having an asset size of 14%. Non-scheduled one, they are having the asset size of 17%. Total of urban is 31%, so उसमें 17% आपका non-scheduled है and scheduled one is the 14%. This particular division is based on the asset size. I hope you will understand and I'll hope you will get the idea कि किसके पास कितनी asset हैं, right? When we compare rural and urban, so the rural cooperative sector is having much more assets as compared to the urban counterparts. Okay, and even though primary agriculture credit societies, they are so much high in the number, ठीक है, approximately 97% of total rural cooperative credit structure, but still they have the asset size of only 17%. इनके पास में सिर्फ 17% का asset size है. Fine. Now next, see, grassroots lending has been the niche of cooperative bank sector, obviously. Increasingly, however, as other financial institutions like scheduled commercial banks as well as non-banking financial institutions, they are leveraging technology to serve the same clientele. The rural cooperatives, they are facing the formidable competition because of these particular institutions. Their share in the direct credit flow to the agriculture, it has been declining over the years. Now here in this particular chart we are going to see what is the share in credit flow to the agriculture. ठीक है, क्या share रहा है? So this is rural credit cooperatives, this is regional rural banks, and this is commercial banks. See, the data has been taken which has been submitted by the banks to the ensure portal of NABARD, right? So this is a credible data on which you can what you can say, you can have trust. ठीक है, तो अब यहाँ पे हम देखते हैं this comparison has been given year by year. पिछले 2 सालों का अगर मैं कंपैरिजन देख लूं, पिछले 2 सालों में देखिए रूरल कोऑपरेटिव्स, दिस इज द शेयर इन क्रेडिट फ्लो टू एग्रीकल्चर, दिस इज ऑन द बेसिस ऑफ परसेंट, राइट? So if we talk about agriculture, 13% of the credit in 2016 has moved from rural credit cooperatives, 11% has moved from regional rural banks, right? And from commercial banks it has moved 75%. You see, commercial banks have such mammoth share while giving the credit to the agriculture sector. ठीक है, agriculture sector को credit देने में commercial banks have such high role. Then if we'll see in 2022, you see the share of rural cooperatives has decreased to 11%. 11% पे आ गया है. Regional rural banks approximately kind of same. Earlier it was 11.6, now 11.2. Nothing much of a difference has been over here. But for the commercial bank, it has increased slightly. Earlier 75%. Out of total agriculture credit, 75% was given by the commercial banks. But if we will see in 2022, 77.8% is being provided by the commercial banks. Okay? So yes, there has been a slight decrease. Now out of this particular data, you just have to remember this one, right? So it is going to give you idea that what is the share of credit in agriculture by different kinds of institutions which are what you can say nudged for providing credit to the agriculture sector. Okay. Now let's talk about one by one the structure that we saw: urban, rural, and then rural. We are going to talk about the different levels of cooperatives as well. Wait. So firstly, let's start talking about urban cooperative banks. So during the year 2022-23, the Reserve Bank, they adopted 4-tiered regulatory framework for the urban cooperative banks in line with the recommendations of expert committee whose chairman was Shri N.S. Vishwanathan. August 2021, he gave the recommendation. So why this particular regulatory upheaval was there? क्यों ऐसा वापस सोचा गया कि ठीक है हमें चेंजेस लाने चाहिए? Because in the what you can say, in these previous years there was PMC bank crisis, right? Punjab Maharashtra Cooperative Bank, and because of that it was thought of that RBI need to increase their vigil onto cooperative banks. ठीक है, अपना vigil बढ़ाना पड़ेगा. So urban cooperative banks with deposits up to 100 crore, they have been classified as tier 1. Those with more than 100 crores and up to 1000 crore, they have been classified in tier 2, and with deposits more than 1000 but up to 10,000 crores under tier 3. Those above 10,000 crore, they are placed under tier 4. So at present in tier 1, at the end of March 2023, majority of urban cooperatives, they were in the tier 1 category. 6 urban cooperatives, they are residing in the tier 4, contributed more than a fifth of sector's deposit, right? So they have a lot of deposits with them. Now over here, we will have a look onto the performance of scheduled urban cooperative banks and non-scheduled urban cooperative bank, right? Both of them, they are the sub classification of urban cooperative banks. ठीक है, urban cooperative banks का ये sub classification है, scheduled and non scheduled. Why we are calling them as scheduled and non scheduled? Because if they are mentioned in the schedule 2 of RBI Act, then they will be labeled as scheduled. ठीक है, so yes, in the year, see the years of the provision numbers of year 2023, they are provisional. ठीक है, they are provisional. Let us focus on the year 2022. So how they are progressing? Gross NPA ratio is 7.5% and 12.6%, and together it is coming at 10.3%. This is the case. Net NPA 2.5, 3.3 and 2.9. What is the difference of between gross NPA and net NPA? See, आपको नुकसान हो रहा है 10 रुपए का. Great, you are getting a loss of 10 rupees. That is the gross NPA, right? But if you have made some savings to cover up that particular loss, for example, suppose I have made 7 rupees worth of savings in order to cover up that particular loss. Specifically उस loss के लिए मैंने अलग से पैसे बचा के रखे थे. So that will be called as provision, and gross NPA less provision gives me my net NPA कि भाई ठीक है, what will be the final impact onto my profit and loss account. Finally क्या loss होगा मेरे profit and loss account को. Getting my point? So this was the case. So net NPA is 2.5, 3.3 and 2.9. Provision coverage ratio is 66%. Approximately 73%, and together it is 71%, right? So this is the case. Now we'll also see about the priority sector lending norms for the urban cooperative banks, right? This is also something that is what you can say is continuously changing. So revised priority sector lending norms, they have set higher targets for the urban cooperative banks कि आपको ज्यादा प्रायोरिटी सेक्टर लेंडिंग नॉर्म को फुलफिल करना पड़ेगा, राइट? यू सी द प्रायोरिटी सेक्टर लेंडिंग ऑफ अर्बन कोऑपरेटिव बैंक्स वाज 67% एट द एंड ऑफ मार्च 2023. ठीक है, मार्च 2023 के एंड में 67% जो इनका प्रायोरिटी सेक्टर लेंडिंग था. If they had 100 rupees, out of that 67 rupees have went to priority sector that the government has identified. ठीक है, जो गवर्नमेंट ने आइडेंटिफाई किया है 67 rupees उसमें गए हैं, right? The sector thus has already achieved the target which was set for the end of March 2025. Now let us see what are the guidelines talking about. These guidelines were issued first in March 2020 and then they were revised in the July 2023. What are these guidelines? So urban cooperatives, they were asked to meet the target of 60%, then 65%, and progressively 75% of higher of their ANBC and COBC by the end of March 2023. 2025 and 2026 respectively. So 23 के लिए टारगेट था 60, 25 के लिए टारगेट 65 and 2026 के लिए the target was 75%. So it was asked, but you see the UCBs have achieved priority sector lending even more than that. So this was their latest achievement, right? ये उनका achievement है, what they have already achieved, right? The increase in the priority sector, how this have increased, so the clarification for that as well. The urban cooperative banks, the increase that we saw, it was led by the credit to micro, small and medium enterprises, particularly micro enterprises constituting 41% of their total lending. Okay? 41% of their total lending, that means they were giving the credit to the micro, small and medium enterprise. Like the scheduled commercial banks, urban cooperative banks are also required to lend a minimum of 7.5% of their adjusted net bank credit or credit equivalent, that is COBE, to micro enterprises, right? This is under the priority sector guidelines. Priority sector guidelines में उनको minimum इतना देना ही है, but how much they are giving? 41%, and this is one of the reasons of their increased priority sector achievement. ठीक है? In addition, the target of urban cooperative banks for the year 2022-23 for lending to weaker section, it was 11.5%. UCB met both these targets by the end of March 2023. दोनों ही targets जो हैं वो meet up किए गए हैं urban cooperative banks के द्वारा, right? So these are the things that were related to urban cooperative banks, and we have talked about see, we know what is scheduled urban cooperative, we know what is non-scheduled urban cooperative. We have seen their performances, what are their NPAs, what are their provision coverage, and after that we also saw at a combined level that what is the priority sector lending norms for them, right? And how many tiers of regulation is applicable onto them. So these were few of the data that you need to know when we are talking about the cooperatives. Okay? Next, after talking about urban cooperatives, the next thing that we are moving on to is rural cooperatives. ठीक है? अब हम rural cooperative पे move कर रहे हैं, and we are also going to see various parts of it and their performances as well. So rural credit cooperatives, they have a history of more than a century, and they were set up to address the concerns of inadequate access to the formal and affordable credit in rural areas. यहाँ पे मैं आपको याद दिला देना चाहती हूँ, initially when we saw the chart of urban and rural cooperatives on the basis of the asset size, please remember 69% of the total cooperative assets are there with the rural cooperatives and 31% of the assets are with the urban cooperatives. So ज़्यादा assets जो हैं वो rural cooperatives के पास हैं, and it justifies as well because we have a lot of population in rural India only. ठीक है? So rural cooperatives, they have carved out a niche for themselves in the rural credit delivery because they have got a wide reach. ठीक है? They are consisting of two kinds of cooperatives. Number one short term, number two long term. ठीक है? पहले short term भी cooperatives भी हैं and then long term cooperatives भी हैं. These are the twin bifurcations under the rural cooperatives. Its share in the total assets increased to 69%. Right? There was a low of 65% at the end of March 2018, but now in the total asset size, rural cooperatives are having 69% share. That means that is a lot more. Now, how the rural cooperatives differ from their urban counterparts, let us see that as well. किस तरीके से differ करते हैं? So rural cooperatives, they differ from their urban counterparts in terms of their geographical reach, number one, right? Balance sheet composition, number two, and profitability indicators along with the asset quality. But the prime thing which makes a difference between the rural and urban is their geographical thing, ठीक है? Geographical reach or the areas that they are covering. Rural cooperatives, they have a larger geographic presence, but their deposit pool is smaller. See, yes, the population is high in rural India, but the end of the day their buying capacity or the savings that they are having, जो उनके पास में पैसा है, जो उनके पास में बचत है, वो कम है if we compare it with the urban India. So increasing their dependence on the costlier borrowings, ठीक है, या तो आपके पास में कस्टमर डिपॉजिट्स हो, otherwise you need to borrow. If you want to give the loan, then you need to borrow, right? See, these are the two sources that one has, ठीक है, यही तो दो sources होते हैं, which in turn has an adverse impact on their profitability as well, right? Now, within the rural cooperatives, if we'll see the financial performance of short-term cooperatives, they have been better compared to the long-term counterparts, and that is why we have saw there are approximately 1,04,000 short-term cooperatives compared to very meager 600 something your long-term cooperatives, right? तो number भी rural short-term cooperatives के ज़्यादा हैं as compared to the long-term cooperatives. The latter provides term finance for capital formation and rural non-farm projects. That means your long-term cooperatives किस चीज के लिए वो पैसे देते हैं? For the capital formation or non-farm projects, right? If you need to make certain investment which is going to cost you a lot more, you are going to have funds through what you can say long-term rural cooperatives. आप यहाँ से जो है funds ले सकते हैं. Such longer maturity loans, they are exposed to the risk of fast evolving external environment. Repeated debt waivers, they have also created a moral hazard problem because that impacts the loan recovery. While the share of long-term rural cooperatives in the rural cooperative asset is minuscule, just at 4%, they have disproportionately higher NPAs. You see, asset तो बहुत ही कम है. If there are 69% of rural cooperative asset, out of that just 4% belongs to long term cooperatives. अगर rural cooperatives के पास में समझ लीजिए 69% of the assets are there, then out of it only 4% assets belong to long term cooperatives. ठीक है, long term cooperatives के पास में just 4% ही है, but they have a lot, there is a lot more problem of NPAs when we talk about the long-term rural cooperatives as compared to the short-term cooperative, right? Now, first of all, we'll start talking about the short-term rural credit cooperatives, and then we'll shift to the long-term rural cooperatives. So, short-term rural cooperatives, there is a three-tier structure of state cooperatives, district central cooperatives and primary agriculture credit society. If I talk about in numbers, अगर मैं numbers के basis पे बात करूं, so 97% of rural cooperatives they are in the primary agriculture credit societies nature. ठीक है, 97% in numbers. But if I talk about an asset size, right? अगर मैं asset size में बात करूं, so out of the short-term rural credit cooperatives, district central cooperative banks has the highest amount of asset. ठीक है, इनके पास जो है वो highest amount of asset है. Moving ahead. Wait. Apart from short-term crop loans to the farmer, the scope of their operations has also widened over the time to cover non-farm sector with term lending to allied sector and microfinance. At the end of March 2022, the short-term rural cooperative sector, they consisted of 34 state-level cooperatives, right? 351 district-level cooperatives and 1,04,266 PACS. That means out of short-term rural cooperatives 97% are PACS. ठीक है, और बाकी का ये आपका छोटा सा district level and the state level cooperatives are there. Even the district level cooperative is having a very high amount of asset base, right? Approximately 31%. Now we are going to see some indicators as well. कुछ indicators भी देख लेते हैं. So here we will be discussing both short term as well as long term. It must not be very visible to you. Just Give me a moment, please. Yes, I hope it is much better now in visibility. Okay, so this is the case. Here we will be discussing both short term as well as the long term cooperatives. हम किसके बारे में बात कर रहे हैं? We are talking about rural cooperatives, right? Rural credit cooperatives and the bifurcations of it, short term and then long term. स्टेट लेवल भी है, डिस्ट्रिक्ट लेवल भी है एंड प्राइमरी एग्रीकल्चर क्रेडिट सोसाइटी लेवल भी है. एंड देन ओवर हियर योर स्टेट लेवल एग्रीकल्चर रूरल डेवलपमेंट बैंक एंड प्राइमरी लेवल एग्रीकल्चर एंड रूरल डेवलपमेंट बैंक्स आर देयर. यू कैन सी द नंबर्स कितने हैं, राइट? What is their presence in numbers? Then we see the balance sheet indicators has also been provided. Please do not go for that, right? Something which is important over here is non-performing assets. ठीक है, non-performing assets क्या है? You will see state cooperatives का short term में 6% है, district level 10%, primary agriculture credit society 32% is the NPA level. And when I talk about long term cooperatives, you see the NPA level is too high. ठीक है, long term, what you can say, long term credit cooperatives, they are having a very high NPA, 35% and 43%. This is as a percentage of the loans which is outstanding, right? What is the total asset that they have provided? We have seen this particular statement before, that as compared to the short term cooperatives, long term cooperatives are facing the problem of higher NPAs. So this particular diagram proves this particular thing. Yes. So among the short-term rural credit cooperatives, the state cooperative banks, they have consistently outperformed the other two with lower NPAs, higher return on assets and higher recovery to demand ratios, right? That means the financial performance of state cooperatives has been really good. PACS are the weakest link. Why? Because their what you can say, NPA ratio is really worrying, with high dependency on the borrowings, and they have higher losses as well in the year 2021. So they are not performing really well if we talk about the financial indicators. Next is state cooperative banks. इसके बारे में बात करते हैं. So out of the short term structure, we have three different levels: state, district and PACS. तो अब हम इन तीनों के बारे में बात करेंगे. So state cooperative banks, they are operating in 3-tier or the mixed tier structure. In a 2-tier structure, they mostly located in a northeastern part of India. They operate through their own branches, whereas in case of 3-tier structure, they work as an apex bank for all the district cooperative credit institution, right? More than 45% of their credit is towards the agriculture. So that is one thing that we can focus on. Then we have district central cooperative banks. What is district central cooperative bank talking about? So they constitute the second tier in the short term rural cooperative structure, right? They have 13,000 branches at the end of March 2022. 20 states or UTs, they have one or more district cooperative credit institution. In 14 states, there are no district credit cooperative structure, right? And only a 2-tier structure exists. They have a larger presence in the central region. So this is where they are highly represented. In the 2-tier structure, you only have a state level cooperative and then primary agriculture credit society. This is the level that you have when you are having a 2-tier structure, right? And it is followed by the borrowings from the state cooperatives and the refinance from the NABARD. Okay. Now, more than 50% of district cooperative credit total lending is directed towards agriculture, and more than 75% of their total lending is conducted through the primary agriculture credit society. So this is how they operate. ठीक है? If I talk about the sector, more than what you can say 50%, more than half of their lending is going through the going towards the agriculture, right? And if I talk about the lending, how they are giving the loan, so 75% of their credit is going through the primary agriculture credit society. Primary agriculture society, they are at the what you can say ground level of the rural structure, rural cooperative structure, or the short term cooperative structure. They are the lowest tier, and the members are mostly the farmers, and they are member shareholders, with 80% of the primary agriculture credit societies total lending is going towards the agriculture sector. See, in rural sector you have so many things, agriculture, allied activities, right? So out of that, 80% of the PACS lending is going towards the agriculture. Apart from extending short term as well as the medium term finance, they also supply agriculture inputs, consumer articles and marketing of their members produce. ठीक है, मार्केटिंग का भी काम करते हैं अपने फार्मर मेंबर्स के लिए. Then few of the information at the end of March 2022, they have served some 16.9 crore members and 4.8 crore borrowers. In terms of business, deposits, working capital, loans and advances, the southern region has dominated, right? So southern region is dominating when we are talking about the cooperative structure. कभी भी cooperative structure के बारे में अगर हम बात करेंगे तो, and the borrower to member ratio, which gauges the credit penetration, it has declined to 28.6% from 39.1% in 2020, because there has been increase in the number of members and a large decline in the number of borrowers, right? How many members you have, then how many borrowers you have. So this is the ratio that we compute in order to determine that how much credit is PACS is able to provide. So there has been a decline in this particular indicator as well. During the year, small farmers, they have replaced others and marginal farmers as the largest category of borrowers. So small farmers, they are getting the large amount of credit. Now let's talk about short term में हमने बात कर ली. Short term में we talked about state level, district level and PACS, 3 levels. Now in the long term, we are going to talk about the 2 levels. State Cooperative Agriculture Rural Development Bank, they are the apex institution in the long term rural cooperatives, both for providing the finance as well as for coordinating the functions of the primary level and their branches. If we see data wise, at the end of March 2022, the state cooperative agriculture rural development banks, they have operated in 13 states with 794 branches. Their consolidated balance sheet has expanded in the second year. On the liability side, the borrowings have rebounded. Now, why I am not telling the data for it? Because I have already inserted a chart. Okay, a chart already inserted hai, where we have seen that what are the assets, what are the borrowings, what is the NPA levels for both short term as well as the long term cooperatives. Finally, we have primary cooperative agriculture and the rural development bank. Obviously, by the name itself, it is depicted that they are providing long term nature of funding. Okay, long term nature of funding is being provided. At the end of March 2022, 604 primary cooperative agriculture rural development banks were there. Okay, in the year 2021, there has been a slowdown in the borrowings. During the year 2021, both income and expenditure has contracted and there has been steeper what you can say loss, and it has increased the net losses for this particular entity. If you want to see the actual data, you can see the diagram which was inserted before. Although internal expenses provisioning requirements have reduced, but the wage bill has increased the total expenditure. NPA ratio, that is your non-performing asset ratio, has also deteriorated, right? And the lowest recovery to demand ratios, they were observed in the northern area. So this is the thing. Now we have completed the cooperatives in detail, right? Every level, what is their performance very recently. All the data that I have discussed in this particular lecture has been sourced through RBI, right? The financial year of 2023-2024 is not over yet. so we cannot talk about it. There are no datas for it, and all the datas that are available are provisional in nature. So that is why the all data that you have seen in this particular lecture is pertaining to the year 2022 and 2023, right? So this is the authentic data. You can have total trust onto it. This is an updated data as well. And I hope you would have understood the lecture really well. And this is the total thing about the cooperatives, right? The history and the structure we have already covered in the previous part, and in this particular part we have talked about the recent financial performance and their, what you can say, role towards the rural credit structure. This is it from my side in this particular lecture. I hope you would have found the lecture useful. If you did, then please do not forget to like this video, and thank you so much for joining in.